All right, two prominent members of the Oath Keepers are being sentenced for their actions on the attack on the U.S. Capitol on January 6th of 2021. The judge saying that the actions of Stewart Rhodes, the founder and the leader of the far-right group, the Oath Keepers, amounted to domestic terrorism, that he is going to be sentenced to 18 years in prison. Kelly Meggs also being sentenced today. They were both found guilty, you may recall, of seditious conspiracy. We have CNN senior crime and justice reporter Caitlin Polantz joining us now. Caitlin, this just broke. Tell us the very latest.
Right. So the judge has just delivered the sentence to Stewart Rhodes. He will be spending 18 years in federal prison for the crimes he committed up to and including on January 6th as he gathered those Oath Keepers to Washington, D.C., and then they went inside the Capitol. And when he was leading the organization and wanting to essentially foment violence in the United States because of what the government was doing, because of the transfer of power from Donald Trump to Joe Biden. The judge, Amit Mehta, is just finishing his speech to Rhodes and delivering that sentence right now. And he is fully aware, you can tell by what the judge is saying, how worried he is for the ongoing threat that this political extremism that Stewart Rhodes espouses. Even today, the judge just asked, I dare say we now hold our collective breath when an election is approaching. Will we have another January 6th? It remains to be seen. And then he pointed out to Rhodes how much Rhodes is not showing any remorse at all, and that how he is believing from what Stewart Rhodes just said in the courtroom to him today, that Rhodes is ready to take up arms the moment he is released from prison. That now we know that will be many, many years from now. 18 years is what the sentence is at this time. Brianna?
The judge's words here, in terms of making this decision, quoting here, this is an additional level of calculation, speaking of Rhodes. This is an additional level of planning. This is an additional level of targeting an institution of American democracy at its most important moment, the transfer of power. That informing the judge's decision here, saying that here was the time when the U.S. when the U.S. Congress was certifying the election, and that's when Rhodes and his group, in the judge's view, struck. And that's informed the judge's decision to describe this as, in effect, domestic terrorism.
Judge Amit Mehta also getting to the root of the planning and organization that went into this attack, saying, quote, he was the reason they were, in fact, in Washington, D.C. Oath Keepers wouldn't have been there but for Stewart Rhodes. I don't think anyone contends otherwise. Caitlin, if you're still with us, bring us up to speed on the situation with his accomplice, who's also facing a sentence today.
Right. That man is named Kelly Meggs. He's from Florida, and he is essentially the number two, the person that Rhodes was giving direction to, and who was leading others on January 6th in Washington, D.C. Now, the judge has already indicated that Meggs would not have been doing those things if it were not for Rhodes. And so there is the possibility that he could get a much lighter sentence, or at least a lighter sentence than Stewart Rhodes today. We know that 18 years for Stewart Rhodes, the Justice Department was asking for more than that. We know, too, that Kelly Meggs, the Justice Department wants 21 years for him. It doesn't look like he would get that much amount of time, but we don't know yet exactly how his sentencing will go. That is not until 1:30 this afternoon. But Judge Mehta really does have some harsh words for Stewart Rhodes today, and how much of a threat seditious conspiracy and what these men did, what the Oath Keepers did on January 6th, did to shake the foundation of democracy and the transfer of power.
Caitlin, you've been covering this for some time. The judge said that Rhodes did not express remorse for this, and the judge stated that feared that if freed, he'd attempt this again. What exactly did Rhodes say through the course of this trial that gave the judge that concern?
Right. Well, the judge's words specifically was that, as we heard you speak today, the moment you are released, you will be prepared to take up arms against our government. He's quoting back to him, and that's because Stewart Rhodes spoke for about 20 minutes today and essentially revealed how extreme he still is. He believes that the election of 2020 was illegal. He believes that there is a criminal regime governing the United States. He believes he is a political prisoner. But Judge Mehta said to him, no, you are not. It is not because of your political beliefs that you are here today. It is because you believe violence was the way to achieve the outcome of the election that you preferred. And that is not the way that American democracy works.
There was so much evidence, too, Caitlin, here about not just what Rhodes did in the lead up to January 6th and during in terms of coordination, but what he did afterwards, right? You had some who were facing charges who were trying to make an argument that this was something that got out of hand. His actions right afterwards in the weeks and months that followed made it very clear, no, this was the entire point of what he was trying to do.
Right. He was still sending messages even after January 6th, and that became a key piece of why this was a seditious conspiracy case. I mean, they had been waiting, the Oath Keepers and Rhodes were waiting for President Trump at the time to basically call them and invoke the Insurrection Act to take over the Capitol and block the transfer of power. And when they failed on January 6th, Rhodes continued to send messages to his group, essentially saying that maybe they should regroup and continue to figure this out. So that is really part of what this case is. And yesterday, whenever the Justice Department was beginning to lay out some of their arguments for this sentencing today, they were reading back to back many of the things that Stewart Rhodes were saying and brought it up again today, that how often he talked about fighting, about bloody revolution, about civil war. And then after that, the judge acknowledged today that there was no documented message of Stewart Rhodes ever expressing regret after January 6th in the many, many messages that he sent.
We want to get some legal perspective now. Caitlin, please stand by. Let's go to Dave Ehrenberg, who's been watching this case very closely. Dave, your reaction to this sentence, 18 years for Stewart Rhodes. The prosecutor's asking for 25.
Yeah, I thought it was a little light. The prosecutors asked for something within the sentencing guidelines, and the judge, after hearing Rhodes's diatribe, still gave him under what the prosecutors asked for. But it's still significant because you rarely see anyone convicted for this seditious conspiracy. And when I heard the words that Stewart Rhodes said, it made it clear to me that he is playing for a pardon. He knows he's going to be serving years in prison, and he thinks his best chance to get out of prison is not by showing remorse. It's not on appeal. It's by hoping that Donald Trump becomes president again and then getting a pardon from him.
Yeah. Well, we should note, during the CNN town hall, President Trump said that he would be inclined to pardon many of the January 6 rioters. He said that in a public forum. Evan Perez, you've covered the Justice Department a long time. As you know, the FBI has said for years that domestic extremists, right-wing extremists, are the #1 terror threat in this country, which I think folks at home might not be aware of. You know, in an age, the last decade or two, when Islamist international terrorism has been such a threat, the FBI has said explicitly, both under the Biden and Trump administrations, that this is the biggest terrorism threat.
Right, and it's a really complex threat that the FBI, the Homeland Security Department, they grapple with, because these groups, they recruit from former military members, they recruit former police people who are essentially, trained to protect us, protect the Constitution, protect our institutions, and they adopt this ideology that essentially takes the view that the institutions need to be brought down, that the U.S. government is the enemy. And so this has appealed to a lot of people around the country. And this group, the Oath Keepers in particular, are very tricky for the FBI to deal with, because as you can tell, there's a lot of sympathy for some of these guys, depending on where you are in the country. And again, because of the fact that they have this past in the U.S. military, it's often a very difficult thing for them to try to infiltrate these groups, for them to try to figure out where does the threat lie, right? A lot of times, especially in the last couple of years with some of the racial justice protests, these guys would show up to try to essentially instigate things. And so that's one of the difficulties here for the FBI, is to try to figure out, how to go at these groups without violating their First Amendment rights. You have a right, by the way, to say that the U.S. government is wrong, and you have a right to protest all of that. Where it crosses the line is, of course, what these men are accused of doing, which is to try to essentially use that moment on January 6th to try to block the transfer of power.